The day my mother gave me the ultimatum still burns in my memory like a fresh wound. I can picture every detail, the way her fingers gripped her wine glass, how my father's shoulders tensed, and the look of smug satisfaction on my sister Yasmin's face. My name is Alina, and 7 years ago, I chose love over family. Not that they saw it that way. It's him or us, my mother declared, her voice cutting through the tension in our family dining room. You can't possibly expect us to accept a man like that into our family. I stared at the text message from Landon lighting up my phone. Everything okay? I'm here if you need me. My fingers trembled as I set the phone face down on the table. Mom, you don't even know him, I protested, fighting to keep my voice steady. The charges were dropped. He was innocent. Innocent men don't get arrested in the first place. Yasmin chimed in, ever ready to twist the knife. God, Alina, how naive can you be? My brother Matthew sat silently, studying his plate as if it held the secrets of the universe. Typical. He never could handle confrontation. Your sister's right. Dad finally spoke, his words heavy with disappointment. We've worked too hard building our reputation in this community. What will people say when they find out our daughter is dating an ex-con? He was cleared of all charges. I slammed my hand on the table, making the silverware jump. He built his company from nothing, and now... Enough! Mom's voice cracked like a whip. She set down her wine glass with deliberate precision. Alina, we're not asking you to choose. We're telling you how it's going to be. End things with Landon or don't bother coming back here. The silence that followed felt like a physical weight on my chest. I looked around the table at the faces I'd known all my life. Mom's stern disapproval, Dad's weary resignation, Yasmin's barely concealed satisfaction, and Matthew's studied indifference. You want me to choose? I stood up slowly, my chair scraping against the hardwood floor. Fine. I choose him. Alina, Dad warned, think very carefully about what you're doing. I have thought about it. I've thought about how none of you bothered to meet him, to hear his side of the story, to see the amazing person he is. My voice grew stronger with each word. You're so worried about your precious reputation that you can't see past your own prejudices. Don't you dare lecture us about prejudice, Mom snapped. That man, I cut her off, is the person I love. And if you can't accept that, then maybe I don't need this family. Yasmin laughed, a sharp, cruel sound. You'll come crawling back when he shows his true colors. Men like that don't change. I grabbed my phone and purse, my movements sharp and decisive. You know what's funny, Yasmin? At least Landon owned up to his mistakes and worked to become better. When was the last time any of you admitted to being wrong about anything? If you walk out that door, Mom said, her voice ice cold, don't expect to be welcomed back. I paused at the doorway, my hand on the frame. You know what, Mom? Right now, I can't imagine wanting to come back. The drive to Landon's apartment was a blur of tears and anger. When I pulled into his parking spot, he was already waiting outside, concern etched across his face. One look at me, and he knew. They made you choose, he asked softly as I fell into his arms. I nodded against his chest, breathing in the familiar scent of his cologne. I chose you. He pulled back slightly, his eyes searching mine. Alina, I can't let you give up your family for me. Maybe if I talk to them. No, I said firmly, wiping my eyes. They made their choice. I made mine. We'll build our own life, create our own family. Are you sure? His voice was gentle, but I could hear the worry underneath. I looked up at him, really looked at him. The man who had turned his life around, who had built something meaningful from nothing, who loved me without conditions or ultimatums. I've never been more sure of anything in my life. That night, as we lay in bed, my phone buzzed with messages from my family. I turned it off without reading them. The choice was made, the die cast. I didn't know then that this decision would set in motion events that would change all our lives forever. But that's the thing about choices. You never really know their full impact until years later, when you look back and realize that some bridges, once burned, leave ashes that never quite cool. 7 years can change everything. I stood at the floor-to-ceiling windows of our penthouse office, watching the city buzz 40 stories below. My reflection showed a woman my family wouldn't recognize. Polished, confident, successful. The scared girl who drove away from their house that night was gone. "Mrs. CEO," Landon's voice came from behind me. "The board is waiting." I turned to face my husband, straightening my blazer. "Still feels surreal." "You earned this," he said, squeezing my shoulder. "Every single bit of it." The journey flashed through my mind. Our first tiny office, the late nights, the endless cups of coffee. We'd built this empire together, brick by digital brick. "Remember our first client meeting?" I asked as we walked toward the boardroom. "That startup that thought we were too small to handle their security needs?" Landon laughed. "Now they're one of our biggest clients. You convinced them to take a chance on us." "We convinced them," I corrected. "You with your brilliant software, me with my pitch." The boardroom doors opened to reveal 20 faces turned expectantly toward us. My best friend Hazel, our chief marketing officer, gave me a subtle thumbs up. "Ladies and gentlemen," Landon addressed the room. "As founder of SecureFlow, I've made many decisions over the years. But naming our new CEO?" He turned to me with pride in his eyes. "That was the easiest choice I've ever made." The applause felt like validation, not just of my abilities, but of every choice that led me here. After the meeting, Hazel cornered me in my new office. "Okay, Spill, how does it feel to be the youngest female CEO of a Fortune 500 company?" I sank into my chair, finally letting my professional mask slip. "Honestly, it feels like vindication." "Have you heard from them?" Hazel knew about my family. She'd been there through everything. "Not since last year's Christmas card was returned unopened." I pulled up our company's latest press release on my computer. "But this announcement might change that." "You think they'll reach out now that you're successful?" "I know they will." I clicked through our stock prices, all trending upward. Money and status are the only things they truly respect. And when they do. Hazel perched on my desk, her expression concerned. "What then?" Before I could answer, my assistant Sarah buzzed in. "Ms. Alina, your husband's here with champagne." Landon entered carrying a bottle and 3 glasses. "Hope I'm not interrupting?" "Just girl talk," Hazel winked. "Well, this calls for celebration." He poured the champagne with practiced ease. "To my brilliant wife, who took a small cybersecurity startup and helped transform it into a billion-dollar company." "To us," I corrected, raising my glass, "to proving everyone wrong." Later that night, as Landon and I walked home through the city streets, he brought up what we'd both been thinking. "Your family will see the announcement. Let them see it." I stepped over a puddle, my heels clicking on the pavement. Let them see exactly what they threw away. "You never told me what you'd do if they tried to reconcile." I stopped walking, turning to face him under the glow of a street lamp. "Remember what you said when we started the company? Success is the best revenge?" He nodded, realization dawning in his eyes. "You've been planning for this." 7 years is a long time to think about justice. I resumed walking, my stride purposeful. "If they reach out, when they reach out, I'll be ready." "Alina?" His tone carried a warning. "Don't worry," I assured him, taking his hand. "Everything I do will be completely legal, just like you taught me." At home, I stood on our balcony, looking out at the city lights. My phone buzzed with congratulatory messages from colleagues and friends. Soon I knew there would be other messages, different messages. Landon joined me, wrapping his arms around my waist. "Whatever you're planning, just remember, we built all this together. Don't let them take away your peace." I leaned back against him, feeling the steady beat of his heart. "They took away my family. My peace was collateral damage." "We made our own family," he reminded me. "Look at everything we've achieved." He was right, of course. We had everything: success, respect, love. But some wounds don't heal clean. Sometimes they leave scars that itch for resolution. My phone buzzed again. This time it was an email from our PR team with tomorrow's newspaper headlines: "SecureFlow names new CEO, the rise of Alina Simmons." I smiled, knowing that somewhere in the city, my family would be reading those same headlines over their morning coffee. The thought filled me with a satisfaction I hadn't felt in years. The game was about to begin, and I had all the pieces in place. The call came exactly 3 days after the announcement. I was in my office reviewing quarterly reports when Sarah's voice crackled through the intercom. "Ms. Alina, There's a Yasmin Fuller on line 1. She says she's your sister. My hand hovered over the phone. 3 days. Longer than I'd expected, but right on schedule. Put her through, I said, straightening in my chair. Alina? Yasmin's voice hadn't changed. Still that same sugary sweetness that masked a serpent's tongue. It's been so long. 7 years, 2 months, and 16 days. I kept my voice neutral. But who's counting? A nervous laugh. I saw the news. CEO of Secure Flow. We're all so proud. We? I interrupted. And who exactly is we, Yasmin? The family, of course. Mom and Dad, Matthew. We've all been following your success. I pulled up my email, clicking through to a folder labeled Family. Inside were screenshots of their social media posts over the years, their carefully curated lives, never once mentioning me. How interesting, I said. I must have missed all your congratulatory messages along the way. About that. She paused, and I could picture her rehearsing her next words. We may have been hasty in our judgment. About everything. About Landon. Hasty? I laughed, the sound sharp enough to cut. That's what you're calling it? People change, Alina. We've changed, and clearly we were wrong about Landon. Look at everything you've built together. I pressed my fingertips against my desk, grounding myself. Why are you calling, Yasmin? Really? Another pause. I miss my sister. We all miss you. Matthew's getting married next month, and Mom and Dad's 40th anniversary is coming up. It feels wrong not having you there. And the fact that I'm now CEO of a Fortune 500 company has nothing to do with this sudden attack of conscience? That's not fair, she protested. We're family. We were family, I corrected. 7 years ago, when I needed you most. Can't we move past that? Meet for coffee, maybe? Just you and me? The door opened and Hazel walked in, stopping short when she saw me on the phone. I waved her in. You know what? I said to Yasmin. Coffee sounds perfect. Tomorrow 10 a.m. at Riverside Cafe. Really? The surprise in her voice was almost comical. That's wonderful. I'll be there. After hanging up, I turned to Hazel. Right on schedule. That was her? Hazel dropped into the chair across from me. What did she want? Exactly what we predicted. Family reunions, wedding invitations, and a healthy dose of guilt tripping. And you agreed to meet her? I smiled, pulling up a different folder on my computer. Of course, it's all part of the plan. Alina. Hazel leaned forward. Are you sure about this? Revenge might feel good in the moment, but this isn't just revenge, I cut her off. This is justice. They need to understand what they did. My phone buzzed. A text from Landon. Yasmin called you? News travels fast, I muttered, typing back, yes, meeting her tomorrow. His response was immediate. Want me there? No, I replied. I need to do this alone. Hazel was watching me carefully. What exactly are you planning? I turned my monitor toward her, showing the event details for SecureFlow's upcoming 10th anniversary gala. The biggest tech celebration of the year. Every major player in the industry will be there. Press, celebrities, influencers. And your family? They'll receive very special invitations. After all, I smiled, we're reconciling. This seems elaborate even for you. 7 years gives you time to plan. I stood up, walking to the window. They didn't just reject me, Hazel. They tried to break me. They wanted me to fail, to come crawling back, proving them right. But you didn't. No, I didn't. And now they want to pretend none of it happened. To slip back into my life now that it's convenient. I turned back to her. They don't get to do that. My phone buzzed again. Yasmin confirming tomorrow's meeting. Perfect. Just be careful, Hazel warned. Don't let this consume you. I nodded, but my mind was already racing ahead, plotting each move like a chess game. Tomorrow would be the opening gambit, appearing receptive, vulnerable, ready to reconcile. Yasmin would report back to the others, and then, trust me, I told Hazel. Everything is going exactly as planned. As she left, I pulled up the gala invitation template on my screen. It would be perfect, elegant, exclusive, promising everything my status-obsessed family couldn't resist. They thought they were orchestrating a reunion. In reality, they were walking right into my carefully laid trap, and I couldn't wait to spring it. Riverside Cafe buzzed with morning energy as I watched Yasmin approach my table. She looked exactly the same. Designer handbag, perfect makeup, practiced smile. I stood to greet her, accepting her tentative hug with calculated warmth. "You look amazing," she gushed, sliding into her seat. "Success suits you." "Coffee first," I smiled, signaling the waiter. "Then we can talk." Once our orders arrived, Yasmin launched into her carefully rehearsed speech. "We've all changed so much, Alina. Matthew's found someone wonderful. Mom's mellowed out, and Dad, he keeps your newspaper coverage in his study." "How touching." I stirred my latte slowly. "And you? Still working at the boutique?" Her smile faltered slightly. "Actually, I've been thinking about a career change. The fashion industry is so volatile these days." I took a sip, watching her over the rim of my cup. "What did you have in mind?" "Well," she leaned forward conspiratorially. "I heard Secure Flow is expanding its marketing department." There it was. I bit back a smile. "Is that what this is about, Yasmin? A job?" "No!" She reached across the table, grabbing my hand. "This is about family, about making things right. The job, that would just be a bonus, a chance to work together like sisters should." I pulled my hand away, reaching into my bag. "Speaking of family," I withdrew 4 elegant black envelopes. "These are for you, Matthew, Mom, and Dad." Her eyes widened as she took them. "What are they?" "Invitations to Secure Flow's 10th anniversary gala, next month at the Grand Plaza Hotel. Very exclusive. Celebrities, tech giants, press coverage. The perfect place for a family reunion, don't you think?" "Alina, this is... I don't know what to say." "Say you'll come, all of you." I leaned forward. "Let's show everyone that the past is behind us." Back at the office, Hazel was waiting in my private conference room. "How did it go?" "Like taking candy from a baby." I kicked off my heels, sinking into a chair. She practically salivated over the invitations. "And she bought it? The reconciliation?" "People believe what they want to believe." I pulled up the gala's security protocols on my tablet. "She thinks she's manipulating me. That's what makes it perfect." Hazel studied the plans. "Private security at every entrance, guest list verification, media coverage. This is thorough. It has to be." I showed her the special instructions for my family's arrival. "When they're turned away at the door in front of everyone, you're going to humiliate them publicly. They'll feel exactly what I felt that night. Rejected, exposed, humiliated." I scrolled through the media list. "And this time, there will be cameras." "Have you told Landon?" I shook my head. "He knows something's coming, but not the details. Plausible deniability." My phone buzzed, a text from Yasmin. "Everyone's so excited about the gala. Mom's already shopping for a dress." "Perfect," I murmured, showing Hazel the message. "Alina?" Hazel set down the tablet. "I get why you're doing this, but revenge has a way of backfiring. This isn't just revenge." I stood, walking to the window. "This is about consequences. They thought they could waltz back into my life when it suited them, use me for connections and jobs. They need to understand that actions have repercussions. And after? What then? Then I move forward. No more looking back, no more wondering what if. Clean slate." The door opened and Landon entered, looking between us. "Everything okay?" "Just finalizing gala details," I said smoothly. "How was your meeting?" "Good." He studied my face. "Yasmin called. Said you were very receptive." "I can be very convincing when I need to be." He exchanged a look with Hazel. "Whatever you're planning, trust me," I cut him off. "Please." Later that night, I reviewed the security footage from the cafe meeting. Watched Yasmin's calculated performance, her practiced sincerity. My phone kept buzzing with messages from Matthew and my parents, all suddenly eager to reconnect. I opened my laptop, pulling up the email I'd prepared. Subject line: Media Advisory, Secure Flow Gala Promises Surprise Announcements. My finger hovered over the send button. Once this went out, there would be no turning back. The press would be primed, cameras ready. I thought about 7 years of silence, of holidays spent alone, of wedding invitations that never came. I pressed send. The pieces were in motion now. In 1 month, my family would arrive at the Grand Plaza Hotel, dressed in their finest. ready to capitalize on my success. Instead, they'd find locked doors and rolling cameras. Sometimes the best revenge isn't served cold, it's served with a spotlight. The Grand Plaza Hotel gleamed like a jewel in the evening light. From my private security room, I watched the monitors as guests began arriving. Each screen showed a different angle. The main entrance, side doors, VIP access points. No detail left to chance. "They're here," Hazel announced, pointing to a monitor showing my family stepping out of a black SUV. My mother emerged first, resplendent in a designer gown. Dad followed, adjusting his bow tie. Matthew and his fiancée, then Yasmin bringing up the rear. "Right on time," I murmured, checking my watch. "Begin Operation Lockout." The head of security, Marcus, spoke into his radio. "All units in position. Commence Protocol 7. I watched as they approached the main entrance, my mother leading the charge like a general into battle. The security guard checked his tablet. "Names, please?" "Lynch party of 5, my mother announced with practiced authority. "We're personal guests of Alina Simmons." The guard frowned at his tablet. "I'm sorry, I'm not seeing those names on the list. There must be some mistake." My mother's voice carried clearly through the speakers. "We're her family." "Ma'am, if you're not on the list, I can't let you in." Yasmin pushed forward. "Call Alina, she'll sort this out." "I'm afraid Ms. Simmons has given strict instructions not to be disturbed." The guard's voice remained professionally neutral. "You'll need to step aside for other guests." The cameras caught every detail. My mother's reddening face, my father's clenched jaw, Yasmin's growing panic. Matthew and his fiancée shifted uncomfortably as other guests began to stare. "This is ridiculous," my mother hissed. "We have invitations." She thrust the black envelope at the guard, who examined it briefly. "I'm sorry, ma'am, but these invitations appear to be invalid." A reporter nearby perked up, sensing drama. "Excuse me, did you say you're Alina Simmons' family?" "Yes." Yasmin jumped in, desperate for an ally. "There's clearly been a mix-up." "Interesting," the reporter cut in, "because Ms. Simmons has publicly stated she has no family." The cameras caught my mother's face crumpling, then hardening. "We are very much her family, and when I speak to her—" "Ma'am." Marcus stepped forward, right on cue. "If you continue to create a disturbance, we'll have to escort you off the property." More reporters were gathering now, phones recording. My family's humiliation was being captured in real time, just as planned. "Alina!" My father's voice boomed across the entrance. "Alina, we know you can hear us." "Should we intervene?" Hazel asked softly. I shook my head, eyes fixed on the monitors. "Not yet." Security began to move in, forming a barrier between my family and the entrance. Guests streamed past them, whispering and pointing. "You can't do this to us." Yasmin was nearly crying now. "We're family." "Family?" I whispered to the screen. Where was family when I needed you? The media was in a feeding frenzy, capturing every moment of their undignified exit. Matthew practically dragged his fiancée away, while my parents stood their ground until Marcus personally escorted them to their car. "Ms. Simmons?" Sarah's voice came through my earpiece. "You're needed for the opening speech in 5 minutes." I stood, smoothing my dress. "How do I look, Hazel?" "Like someone who just won a war." She paused. "Are you sure about this?" They needed to understand. I checked my reflection one last time. 7 years ago, they threw me away like I was nothing. Tonight, they learned what that feels like. The ballroom was packed when I took the stage. Cameras flashed as I approached the microphone, my smile perfectly practiced. "Welcome to SecureFlow's 10th anniversary celebration," I began, scanning the crowd. "Tonight is about family, not the family you're born into, but the family you choose." My eyes found Landon in the crowd, standing with our executive team. He gave me a slight nod, understanding dawning in his eyes. "Success isn't just about making money or gaining power," I continued. "It's about surrounding yourself with people who believe in you, who stand by you when times are tough." From the security room, Hazel sent me a text. "They're still outside, demanding to speak to you." Perfect. Tonight, we celebrate not just our company's success, but the loyalty and trust that made it possible. In business, as in life, you learn who truly stands with you. The applause was thunderous, but I barely heard it. In my mind, I was watching the monitors, seeing my family's faces as they realized the truth. This wasn't a reconciliation, it was reckoning, and it wasn't over yet. The night was young, and I had one more surprise waiting in the wings. The gala was in full swing when Marcus's voice crackled through my earpiece. "Ms. Simmons, they're back, all of them, and your mother is insistent." I excused myself from a group of investors and made my way to the security room. On the monitors, my family had regrouped, this time with reinforcements. My mother's brother, a local judge, was with them. "Let me handle this," I told Marcus, heading for the main entrance. Hazel caught up with me in the hallway. "Are you sure you want to face them?" "Oh, yes." I straightened my spine. "This is the finale." The night air was cool as I stepped outside. Security parted to reveal my family, their perfect appearances now distinctly ruffled. "Uncle Robert," I greeted the judge coolly. "This is a surprise." "Alina," he started, all judicial authority. "This behavior is beneath you. Your mother—" "My mother?" I cut him off. "You mean the woman who disowned me? Who told me I was dead to her?" "That was 7 years ago," my mother interjected. "People change." "No, Mom, people don't change. They just reveal who they truly are." I gestured to the gathering crowd of reporters. "Like tonight, when you thought you could use me for social climbing." "That's not fair." Yasmin stepped forward. "We were trying to make amends." "Really?" I pulled out my phone, scrolling through messages. Let's see. I heard SecureFlow is expanding its marketing department. Matthew's fiancé would love to intern at your company. Your father's investment firm would be interested in a partnership. I looked up. Those kinds of amends? The reporters' cameras were flashing continuously now. My family's expressions ranged from shock to fury as they realized this was being documented. "You set us up," Matthew said slowly. "The invitations, the reconciliation, it was all a trap." "I learned from the best." I smiled coldly. "Family first, right? Isn't that what you always said, Mom?" "Enough!" My father's voice boomed. "You've made your point. You've humiliated us. Are you happy now?" "Happy?" I laughed, the sound sharp as broken glass. "I was happy 7 years ago, before you forced me to choose between my family and the man I loved. I was happy building a life with someone you deemed unworthy, while you spread rumors about me in your social circles." Uncle Robert tried again. "Alina, surely we can discuss this privately." "No." I stepped closer, my voice carrying clearly to the reporters. 7 years ago, you made me face your judgment publicly. Tonight, you face mine." "You ungrateful," my mother started, but security moved forward. "I think it's time for you to leave," Marcus said firmly. "This isn't over," Yasmin hissed as they were led away. "Actually, it is." I held up my phone. "Everything that happened here tonight, it's already trending on social media. The family karma is quite popular." Their faces paled as realization hit. The society pages they loved so much would be telling a very different story tomorrow. Back inside, Landon was waiting. "I saw the commotion. Are you okay?" "Never better." I straightened his tie. "Ready to announce the Tokyo expansion?" He caught my hand. "Alina, what you did out there was necessary." I met his eyes. They needed to understand that actions have consequences, that they can't just waltz back into my life when it's convenient. "And now? Now we focus on what matters." I nodded toward the ballroom. Our real family, the people who stood by us. As we returned to the gala, my phone buzzed with a message from Matthew. "You've destroyed Mom's reputation in her social circles. I hope you're satisfied." I typed back, "Like you destroyed mine 7 years ago? Karma's funny that way." Hazel appeared at my side. "The video's gone viral. Your family's trending for all the wrong reasons." "Good." I watched as Landon took the stage to announce our international expansion. "Let them feel what it's like to be the family scandal for once." "Was it worth it?" she asked softly. I thought about the years of pain, the lonely holidays, the wedding invitations that never came. Then I thought about tonight. Their shocked faces, their desperate attempts to save face, their final realization that they'd lost all power over me. "Every second," I replied, raising my champagne glass as Landon called me to join him on stage. The applause washed over us as I took my place beside my husband, surrounded by people who had earned their place in my life. This was my family now, and unlike the one I was born into, this one was built on something stronger than blood. It was built on choice. 1 week after the gala, I sat in my home office, 5 identical packages spread across my desk. Each contained a USB drive and a letter addressed to every member of my family, including Uncle Robert. "Are you sure about this?" Landon asked from the doorway. "The gala footage is already everywhere." "This is different." I picked up one of the letters. "This is personal." The footage I'd compiled wasn't just from the gala. It included security camera clips from 7 years ago, the night they threw me out, social media posts where they'd mocked my choices, screenshots of them trying to sabotage my early career. "You kept everything," he noted, looking over my shoulder at the computer screen. "I learned from you. Always keep receipts." My phone buzzed, Hazel sending a link to the latest Society page article. "Tech CEO's family drama exposes high society hypocrisy." "They're being crucified in the press," Landon said softly. "Isn't that enough?" I sealed the last envelope. "No, they need to understand exactly what they did. Every cruel word, every manipulative action." "Alina, I'm sending these by courier. They'll arrive simultaneously." I checked my watch. In about 2 hours. Right on schedule, my phone lit up with a call from Yasmin. I let it go to voicemail. Then Matthew, then Mom. Their messages grew increasingly frantic as they watched the footage. "How dare you record private family moments?" Mom's voice shook with rage in her voicemail. "Private family moments?" I muttered, playing the security footage again. "Like when you called me a disgrace? When you told the country club I was mentally unstable?" The doorbell rang. Landon went to answer it while I stayed focused on the screens, watching the social media fall out in real time. "Your sister's here," he called up. "Which one?" I asked, though I already knew. "Yasmin. She's crying." I descended the stairs slowly, finding my sister collapsed on our sofa, mascara streaking her cheeks. "How could you?" she choked out. "That footage, my friends have seen it, my boss. Karma's a mirror, Yasmin." I remained standing. "It reflects back what you put out into the world." "I lost my job today," she whispered. "The boutique said they can't have this kind of scandal associated with their brand." "Like when you told my first investors I was unstable? When you sabotaged my early contracts?" She flinched. "That was different." "No, it wasn't." I sat across from her. "You tried to destroy my life because I chose love over your toxic control. Now you're experiencing the consequences." "Mom's had to resign from 3 charity boards," she said quietly. "Matthew's fiance's family is reconsidering the wedding." "Actions have consequences," I repeated, something our family never seemed to understand. My phone buzzed again. Uncle Robert this time. His message was brief. "We need to talk, all of us." "They want to meet," I told Landon after Yasmin left. "Damage control, probably." "Will you go?" I pulled up the final video on my laptop, the one I hadn't included in the packages. Security footage from my office the day after the gala, showing me recording a message. "No need," I smiled. "I've already prepared my response." The video went live that evening on all major social platforms. In it, I sat at my desk, composed and professional. 7 years ago, my family gave me an ultimatum. Them or the man I loved. They thought they were punishing me. Instead, they set me free. Success isn't just about wealth or status. It's about choosing your own path, even when others try to block it. This isn't about revenge. It's about truth, about consequences, about showing that family should lift you up, not tear you down. Within hours, it had gone viral. The comments flooded in, stories of family estrangement, of toxic relationships, of choosing love over obligation. "You've started a movement," Hazel texted. "People are sharing their own stories. Choosing love is trending." I closed my laptop, walking to the window. Somewhere in the city, my family was watching their carefully constructed social world crumble. They were feeling what I felt, exposed, vulnerable, judged. But unlike them, I had built something real. Something that couldn't be shattered by society gossip or family disapproval. My phone buzzed one last time, a message from Matthew. "I understand now. What we did to you. I'm sorry." I left it unread. Some apologies come too late. Some bridges, once burned, should stay ashes. Besides, I had a company to run, a husband who loved me, and friends who had become family. That was worth more than any apology. The autumn wind whipped around me as I stood at my father's grave. The funeral had ended hours ago. but I couldn't bring myself to leave yet. Mom and the others had gone, not acknowledging my presence beyond tight-lipped glances. "I thought I'd find you here," Landon said, appearing beside me. "You okay?" "He never reached out," I said quietly. Even at the end. The headlines from last week flashed through my mind. Business tycoon dies without reconciling with CEO daughter. "Maybe he wanted to," Landon offered. "Pride can be a prison. So can hate." I placed a single white rose on the fresh earth. I thought revenge would feel different. Different how? More satisfying. More final. I turned away from the grave. Instead, I just feel empty. Back at the office, Hazel was waiting with fresh coffee and concern. "The press wants a statement about your father's passing." "No statement." I sank into my chair. Let the silence speak for itself. "There's something else." She handed me an envelope. "Your mother's lawyer delivered this." Inside was a letter in my father's handwriting, dated 3 days before his death. "I can't," I whispered, pushing it away. "Want me to read it?" Hazel offered. I nodded, watching her unfold the paper. "Alina," she began, "by the time you read this, I'll be gone. Pride kept me from saying these words while I could. I was wrong. The night we forced you to choose, we weren't protecting our family. We were destroying it. I watched you build an empire from nothing, proving every doubt wrong. You became everything we claimed to value, successful, respected, principled. But you did it without us, because of us. I'm sorry. Not because you're successful now, but because we failed you then. Your mother won't approve of this letter. Some wounds run too deep to heal, but you deserve to know. I died proud of you. Love, Dad." The office fell silent except for the hum of computers. "Alina?" Hazel touched my shoulder. "He was right," I said, standing abruptly. "Some wounds run too deep." I walked to the window, watching the city below. My phone buzzed. Yasmin trying again. She'd been calling daily since Dad's diagnosis. This time, I answered. "What do you want, Yasmin?" "I'm at the coffee shop across from your office," she said quietly. "Just, please, 5 minutes." I found her at a corner table, looking smaller somehow, defeated. "Dad's letter," she began. "Did you—" "Yes?" "He wanted to reach out so many times." She twisted her napkin. "We all did. But after what you did at the gala, exposed us." "I exposed the truth," I corrected. "Nothing more." "The truth?" She laughed bitterly. "The truth is we were terrible to you. The truth is we deserved everything you did. The truth is, I miss my sister. The sister you had died 7 years ago." "I know." She met my eyes. "But maybe the sister you are now would be willing to get coffee sometimes. No agenda, no family pressure, just coffee." I studied her face, searching for manipulation but finding only exhaustion. "Why now?" "Because Dad's death showed me something. Pride and Prejudice cost us 7 years. How many more are we willing to lose?" My phone buzzed. Landon checking in. I typed quickly. "I'm okay, having coffee with Yasmin." His response was immediate. "Remember, forgiveness is for you, not them." "Coffee," I said finally. "Once a month, just us. No Mom, no Matthew, no pressure." "Really?" Hope flickered across her face. "Really, but Yasmin." I leaned forward. "If this is another manipulation—" "It's not," she interrupted. I don't want to be at another funeral wondering about what could have been." Later, in bed, Landon held me as I finally let the tears come. "You know what's funny?" I whispered. "All that revenge, all that planning. And in the end, Dad's letter hit harder than anything I did." "Because it was real," he said softly. "No games, no manipulation, just truth." "Do you think I'm weak for agreeing to coffee with Yasmin?" "I think you're strong enough to set boundaries without building walls." I thought about Dad's letter, about Yasmin's tired eyes, about the weight of carrying anger for so long. "I'm not forgiving them," I said firmly, "but maybe I can stop letting them take up so much space in my head." "That's not weakness," Landon kissed my forehead. "That's wisdom." Outside, The city lights twinkled like stars. Somewhere out there, my family was dealing with their own regrets, their own consequences. But here, in this moment, I was finally free. Not because of revenge, but because I chose to be. Sometimes the best revenge isn't about making others hurt. It's about refusing to let them hurt you anymore. That's the revenge I should have planned all along.
Hi, I'm Michelle. My life might seem like a fairy tale to some, being the daughter of a successful construction tycoon, but I've always preferred a more understated existence. Despite my father's wealth and status, I've never been drawn to the allure of power and prestige. Instead, I found contentment in a simple role within my father's company, far removed from the executive hustle and the burdens of leadership that my older brother, Michael, was set to inherit. My days were filled with routine tasks, paperwork, and the occasional office banter, which suited me just fine. I had no desire to climb the corporate ladder or to immerse myself in the complexities of business strategies. It was a choice that often left people puzzled, especially considering my background, but it was one I made with no regrets. Michelle, don't you ever want more? A position of power in the company? A colleague once asked me during lunch break. I smiled, shaking my head. No, I'm happy where I am. It's peaceful, and I get to avoid all the stress that comes with higher positions. My peace was my sanctuary, and I had no intention of trading it for a life of constant stress and competition. My father, although he didn't fully understand my choice, respected it. He was supportive, as long as I was happy. Michael, on the other hand, was more than eager to take on the mantle of CEO, which suited us both just fine. My uneventful yet satisfying world took an unexpected turn one evening. I was at a casual get-together with friends when I met Jack, a bartender with a charming smile and an easygoing demeanor that I found instantly appealing. We struck up a conversation, and I was drawn to his straightforward and simple view of life. There was something refreshing about his lack of pretense and his contentment with life's simpler pleasures. So, Michelle, what do you do? Jack asked, leaning against the bar, his eyes curious. I work at my father's construction company, but just in a regular job. Nothing too high up, I replied, sipping my drink. That's cool. It's rare to meet someone who's not obsessed with climbing the ladder, Jack said, his voice tinged with respect. I laughed, feeling a sense of ease and connection. Yeah, I guess I'm a bit of an oddity in that sense. I like the simplicity of my life. As the night wore on, our conversation flowed effortlessly. Jack's views on life, his passion for his work, and his ability to find joy in the ordinary resonated with me. There was an unspoken understanding between us, a shared appreciation for the simple things. The early days of my relationship with Jack were like something out of a fairy tale. His courtship was filled with romantic gestures that made my heart flutter. He would surprise me with handwritten notes tucked into my bag, impromptu picnics in the park, and evenings spent walking along the river, talking about everything and nothing. It was a whirlwind romance, one that seemed to defy the norms I was accustomed to in my well-ordered, affluent world. However, not everyone was enchanted by this blossoming love. My father, the stoic CEO of a large construction company, had his reservations. One evening, while we were having dinner at my parents' house, he voiced his concerns. Michelle, are you sure about this young man? A bartender, and with no clear ambitions, he said, his tone laced with skepticism. I sighed, having anticipated his reaction. Dad, Jack's job doesn't define him. He's kind, genuine, and he makes me happy. Isn't that what matters? My father shook his head. Happiness is important, but so is stability, Michelle. I just want what's best for you. I appreciated my father's concern, but I believed he was judging Jack unfairly, basing his opinion on his profession rather than his character. I was convinced that love was enough to bridge any societal gaps. Despite my father's doubts, Jack and I got married in a modest ceremony. It was a beautiful day, marked by the laughter and blessings of our closest friends and family. After the wedding, I eagerly brought Jack to the apartment that would be our first home together. As we stepped inside, I watched Jack's face for his reaction. His eyes scanned the modest living room, the small kitchen, and the humble furnishings. A frown flickered across his face, so brief I almost missed it. "Is everything okay, Jack?" I asked, a knot forming in my stomach. He looked around once more, then turned to me with a forced smile. "Yeah, it's different than I expected. But it's nice, cozy." His words and the hesitation behind them planted a seed of doubt in my heart. Did he expect more from the daughter of a wealthy businessman? Was our modest home a disappointment to him? For the first time since we met, I questioned my decision to marry him. Had I been too quick to overlook the potential challenges our different backgrounds would bring? The joy and romance that had defined our relationship were now tinged with uncertainty, leaving me to wonder what the future held for us. The initial bliss of married life with Jack gradually gave way to a sobering reality. The romance that once seemed boundless was now overshadowed by daily routines and unmet expectations. Jack's reluctance to help around the house became more apparent, and his attitude towards our living situation grew increasingly indifferent. One evening, after a long day at work, I came home to find the apartment in disarray and Jack lounging on the sofa, absorbed in a football game. "Jack, could you help me clean up a bit?" "It's been a hectic day," I asked, hoping for some support. He glanced at me briefly, then back at the TV. "Can't you see I'm watching the game? I've been on my feet all day at the bar." I bit back my frustration and began tidying up myself. The imbalance in our household responsibilities was becoming a glaring issue. Later that night, as we sat down for dinner, I decided to address the elephant in the room. "Jack, I feel like I'm carrying the weight of all the household chores. It's exhausting." He forked his food indifferently. "Michelle, I work nights. I need to rest during the day. You know that." "But I work too, Jack." "A little help would be appreciated," I replied, my voice tinged with fatigue. Jack sighed, his annoyance evident. "All right, I'll try to do a bit more, but don't expect me to turn into a house husband." The conversation left a bitter taste in my mouth. It wasn't just about the chores, it was his lack of willingness to be a partner in this marriage. Jack's attitude towards my career became another point of contention. His once casual inquiries about my job turned into persistent nudges towards ambition. "Why don't you ask your dad for a promotion? You'd make so much more," he would often say. I shook my head, growing weary of this repeated discussion. "Jack, I've told you before. I'm happy with my job. I don't want the stress that comes with a higher position." "But you could have an easy life, Michelle. Think about the money, the comfort," he pressed, his voice laced with frustration. I couldn't help but feel that Jack's interest in my career advancement was driven more by the potential financial gain than by concern for my happiness. The strain in our relationship intensified when Jack began spending more time at the bar, often coming home late or not at all. I felt a growing sense of loneliness and neglect. One evening, when Jack had come home particularly late, I confronted him. "Jack, we barely see each other anymore. You're always at work or out." He shrugged, avoiding my gaze. "I need to unwind after work, Michelle. A man needs his space." "But what about us, our marriage?" I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. He didn't respond, and I lay awake that night, questioning my decision to marry him. The man I fell in love with, who had seemed so perfect in his simplicity, was now a stranger to me. As the days turned into weeks, Jack's behavior began to change drastically. The man who once couldn't wait to come home now lingered after his night shifts at the bar, sometimes not coming home for days at a time. When he did return, there was a scent clinging to him that was unmistakably feminine and definitely not mine. My heart grew heavy with suspicion, the once warm glow of our marriage now dimmed to a flickering ember. One particularly troubling evening, Jack stumbled in well past midnight. The smell of another woman's perfume was so strong it filled the entire room. I couldn't hold back my emotions any longer. "Jack, where have you been? You smell like perfume," I asked, my voice a mix of hurt and accusation. He shrugged off his coat, avoiding my eyes. "I was just at the bar, Michelle. You know how it is, customers get friendly. But you were gone for 2 days, Jack. And this perfume, it's not mine," I pressed, seeking some semblance of truth. He let out an exasperated sigh. "Michelle, you're being paranoid. It's nothing. Just part of the job." I didn't believe him. The trust that once formed the foundation of our relationship was crumbling fast. I needed to know the truth, no matter how painful it might be. The next day, I made a decision. I reached out to Tom, the head of security at my father's company. He had always been like an uncle to me, and I trusted him implicitly. "Tom, I need your help. I think Jack is. I think he's seeing someone else," I said, the words tasting bitter in my mouth. Tom's expression turned serious. "I'm sorry to hear that, Michelle. You know I'll do anything to help you. I'll start keeping an eye on him. We'll get to the bottom of this." I let out a shaky laugh, trying to lighten the mood. "Thanks, Tom. I know you'll find out everything, down to his school grades." Tom gave a small chuckle. "You got it, Michelle. If he's up to no good, we'll find out." As I waited for Tom to get back to me with his findings, the days felt longer and heavier. I was caught in a limbo of hope and fear, part of me wanting to cling to the belief that my suspicions were wrong, while another part braced for the impending heartbreak. The day I received the results of Jack's surveillance from Tom, the head of security at my father's company, felt like a plunge into icy waters. Tom handed me an envelope, his expression somber, eyes filled with unspoken apologies. "Michelle, I wish the news was better," Tom said gently, breaking the tense silence in my living room. Bracing myself, I opened the envelope. The photos spilled out, each one a hammer blow to my heart. There was Jack, my husband, laughing and cozying up to a young woman. She wasn't just any woman, she was the heiress of one of the largest companies in the city, known for her wealth and status. I felt a bitter laugh escape my lips. So, he was looking for a richer catch, I murmured, more to myself than to Tom. Tom placed a comforting hand on my shoulder. "Michelle, you deserve so much better than this." After Tom left, I sat alone with the stinging truth until Jack came home, reeking of alcohol and late-night revelries. I confronted him, the evidence of his betrayal in my trembling hands. "Jack, what is this?" I demanded, my voice sharp with hurt and anger. He barely glanced at the photos before letting out a loud, harsh laugh. "Oh, that. Yes, I've been seeing her. She's everything you're not, Michelle. Ambitious, a future CEO in her father's company." His words cut deep, but I stood my ground. "And that justifies your cheating? I was your wife, Jack." He shrugged, his arrogance palpable. "Wife or not, I need someone who can elevate my life, not keep me stuck in mediocrity. You were just a stepping stone, Michelle." Tears stung my eyes, but I refused to let them fall. "Well, congratulations, Jack. You've shown your true colors. I'm filing for divorce." He smirked, undisturbed by my declaration. "Fine by me. I was getting tired of this charade anyway." That evening, Jack packed his things and left, leaving behind a trail of broken vows and a shattered heart. As I watched him leave, a mix of relief and profound sadness washed over me. The man I had loved and trusted was nothing but a facade, a wolf in sheep's clothing. In the quiet aftermath of his departure, I sat alone in the apartment that once echoed with our laughter and dreams. The pain of betrayal was raw, but within it, I found a glimmer of strength. Jack had used me, but I wouldn't let his deceit define my worth. Life after Jack's departure was a whirlwind of emotions. I had moments of deep sadness, but also a growing sense of liberation. During this turbulent time, an unexpected opportunity presented itself, one that would change the course of my life. One evening, my father invited me to dinner at his place. His demeanor was serious, a rarity for him during our casual meetups. "Michelle, I have something important to discuss with you," he began as we sat down at the dining table, a spread of my favorite dishes before us. "What is it, Dad?" I asked, curiosity piqued. He took a deep breath, his expression somber. "Your brother, Michael, has decided not to take over the company. He's off to Tibet to find himself or something of that sort. I need you to step in." I nearly choked on my water. "Me? Dad, I've never even considered such a role. I'm happy with my current position." He leaned forward, his eyes earnest. "I know, Michelle, but you have a natural understanding of the business. You've been around it all your life. I believe you can do this. But I don't have the experience or the ambition Michael has," I countered, the idea feeling overwhelming. Experience can be gained, and ambition isn't always about climbing to the top. It's also about maintaining and nurturing what's already there, he argued, his tone gentle yet persuasive. I pondered his words, feeling a mix of fear and excitement. "I'll think about it, Dad. It's a big decision." After dinner, I lay awake in bed, thinking about the opportunity. Could I really step into such a large role? Was I ready to take on such a responsibility? But I agreed. The days following my decision to step up in my father's company were a blend of apprehension and quiet determination. My usual routine at work changed dramatically as I started to involve myself in different aspects of the business, areas that were once Michael's domain. One morning, my father called me into his office. His usually stern face had a softer expression. "Michelle, I know this is a big change for you, but I have every confidence in your abilities," he said. I nodded, feeling a mix of nerves and resolve. "Thanks, Dad. I'm just worried I might not live up to your expectations." He smiled reassuringly. "You'll exceed them. Just be yourself, and remember, I'm here to guide you." The first few weeks were a whirlwind of learning. I found myself in meetings that went over my head, but I listened, asked questions, and slowly, things began to make sense. I realized that leadership wasn't just about making big decisions, it was about understanding the intricacies of every part of the business. To my surprise, I discovered I had a knack for planning and budgeting. Numbers that once seemed daunting now told a story I could understand and influence. My father noticed this change. "Michelle, your budget proposal for the next quarter was impressive," he commented one day, looking over the documents I had prepared. "Really? I just tried to find the most efficient way to allocate our resources," I replied, a sense of pride swelling in my heart. "Not just efficient, but innovative too. You have a good head for this," he said, a hint of pride in his voice. Encouraged by his words, I began to take more initiatives. I negotiated with partners, bringing new ideas to the table, and to my surprise, they were well received. The company started to see growth in areas that had been stagnant. Then, 1 year after my divorce, an unexpected message from Jack disrupted the calm that had settled over my life. Sitting in my office late one evening, my phone pinged with a notification. It was a message from Jack on social media, brimming with arrogance and spite. "Hey Michelle, just thought you'd like to know how well I'm doing. Married a real woman, not like you. Check out the pics of us at exotic locations. You could never give me this kind of life." I stared at the screen, a mix of disbelief and anger coursing through me. The photos showed Jack with his new wife, posing in front of luxury cars and lavish resorts. His words stung, but I refused to let him see how much. Still the same arrogant Jack, I muttered to myself. Deciding not to engage, I blocked him without a response. I had moved on from that chapter of my life, and I wasn't going to let him drag me back into the past. A few weeks later, fate brought another twist. I attended a high-profile business event, a gathering of the city's most influential people. As I mingled with the guests, a familiar face caught my eye. It was Jack, looking out of place amidst the crowd of business elites. He spotted me and, to my surprise, approached with a smug grin. "Michelle, long time no see. Let me introduce you to my wife." The woman beside him was dressed extravagantly, her demeanor radiating confidence. Jack continued, "This is my wife, the future director of her father's company. Much more fitting for a man like me." His wife laughed, eyeing me dismissively. "So, you're the ex-wife? Can't believe Jack settled for someone so plain." Before I could respond, an older gentleman joined us. He introduced himself as Jack's father-in-law. His eyes widened in recognition as he looked at me. "You're Michelle? The CEO of that major construction company? My company has been hoping to collaborate with you." Jack's expression faltered, his smugness replaced by a dawning realization of his mistake. His father-in-law turned to him, his voice stern. "Jack, how dare you insult Michelle? She's a respected business leader." Turning to his daughter, he continued, "And you, laughing at someone so accomplished? You should be learning from her." The situation turned awkward for Jack and his wife as the older man chastised them. Feeling vindicated, I excused myself from the uncomfortable scene, a small smile playing on my lips. That evening was a reminder of how far I had come, not just in my career, but in my personal growth. Jack, who once looked down on me, now stood embarrassed and corrected in front of his own family. However, the saga with Jack wasn't quite over. A few days later, he somehow got hold of my phone number and called me. His voice, dripping with venom, filled my ear. "Hey, Michelle, still playing the big shot CEO? We both know you're nothing but a daddy's girl playing dress-up," he sneered over the phone. His words, meant to wound, only fueled my resolve. "Jack, why are you doing this? Haven't you caused enough damage already?" He laughed mockingly. "I just wanted to remind you of your place, Michelle. You may fool everyone else, but not me." I ended the call, seething with anger and frustration. But this time, I decided not to let Jack have the last word. Determined, I reached out to Tom, the head of security at my company. "Tom, I need your help again. Jack is trying to get under my skin. Can you find something that will stop him for good?" Tom, ever the loyal ally, agreed without hesitation. "I'm on it, Michelle. He won't bother you after this." True to his word, Tom delivered. Within a week, he uncovered evidence of Jack's infidelity. He had been cheating on his current wife with multiple women. With a sense of cold satisfaction, I forwarded the evidence to his wife. The fallout was immediate and explosive. Jack's wife, enraged by his betrayal, threw him out. She ensured that he was ostracized from their high society circles, effectively cutting him off from the luxurious life he had schemed so hard to attain. I heard through mutual acquaintances that Jack was back to bartending, his dreams of wealth and status shattered. He was laden with debts, a far cry from the high life he once flaunted. As for me, I focused on rebuilding my life. My work as the CEO brought new challenges and successes, and I found joy in the responsibilities and the growth it offered. The company thrived under my leadership, and I found a renewed sense of purpose in my role. During this time, I met Alan, a colleague from another firm. He was everything Jack wasn't: kind, genuine, and grounded. Our relationship developed slowly, built on mutual respect and shared values. With Alan, I found the companionship and understanding that had been missing in my life. Jack's attempts to bring me down only highlighted his own insecurities and failures. In contrast, I had risen from the ashes of our broken marriage, stronger and more confident. I had found success in my career and happiness in a relationship built on trust and love. As I moved forward with Alan, I knew that the lessons from my past had prepared me for a brighter, more fulfilling future. I had turned the page on a difficult chapter in my life, ready to embrace the new opportunities and joys that lay ahead. My name is Jane, and at 30, I had settled into a comfortable routine. My days were a blend of work at a company where I was an office employee, and evenings were for unwinding, often at my favorite local cafe. What no one knew was the small detail omitted from my business card, but I'll tell you about it later. That particular day, I pushed open the door to the cafe, the familiar scent of roasted coffee beans and the soft undertones of jazz enveloping me. As I walked towards the counter, lost in thought about a new project, I collided with someone. "Oops. I'm so sorry," I blurted out, stepping back. The stranger, a man with an easy smile and an approachable demeanor, chuckled. "No harm done. I should have been more careful. I'm Alex." "Jane," I replied, returning his smile. There was an ease in the conversation that followed, a natural flow that felt refreshing. We decided to sit down with our coffees, finding a quiet corner. "So, Jane, do you come here often?" Alex asked, his eyes twinkling with curiosity. "Yeah, it's my escape from the daily grind. A little oasis of peace," I said, taking a sip of my coffee. Alex nodded. "I get that. It's important to find those little escapes. What do you do that requires such escapes?" I hesitated for a fraction of a second. "Oh, just office work, you know. Lots of numbers and paperwork." I was always careful about revealing too much. He seemed to understand, not prying further. "I can imagine. I work in marketing myself. It's all about creative chaos, but sometimes you just need a break from even that." We talked more about our lives, his passion for marketing, my love for jazz, and our shared appreciation for good coffee. The conversation was effortless, filled with laughter and insights. As the cafe began to clear out, signaling the end of our impromptu meeting, Alex looked at me, a hint of hesitation in his eyes. "Jane, I've really enjoyed talking with you. Would you be interested in meeting up again, maybe for dinner next time?" he asked, an earnest look on his face. I felt a flutter of excitement. "I'd like that, Alex. It's been great chatting with you." We exchanged numbers, and as I walked back to my car, I couldn't help but feel a sense of anticipation. It was just a casual meeting, but something about Alex was different. He had a genuineness that was rare, and I found myself looking forward to seeing him again. The weeks following my fateful meeting with Alex were a whirlwind of dates and deep conversations. We were like two puzzle pieces that fit perfectly. However, one piece of the puzzle remained conspicuously missing: his family. It was a topic Alex artfully dodged each time I brought it up. But that evening, as we strolled through the local park, the autumn leaves crunching under our feet, I decided to delve deeper. "Alex, I've noticed you never talk about your parents. Is everything okay?" I asked gently, looking over at him. He let out a sigh, a sign that the topic was a heavy one. "Yeah, everything's fine. It's just, my parents are a bit difficult." "Difficult how?" I probed, sensing his discomfort. He looked away, focusing on the path ahead. They're snobs, to put it bluntly. They own a small business and have this mindset where they only mingle with people who match their wealth and status. I was taken aback, but curious. "So, they're elitists?" "Exactly," he replied, a tinge of bitterness in his voice. "They judge people based on their income, their job title. It's why I've been hesitant to introduce you to them." I stopped walking, turning to face him. Alex, are you worried they won't accept me because of my job? He met my gaze, his eyes filled with a mix of apology and concern. Jane, you're amazing, and I love that about you. But my parents have this archaic belief that I should be with someone from a certain socioeconomic class. I just don't want them to hurt you with their words. I took his hand in mine, offering a reassuring squeeze. Alex, I'm not afraid of your parents. I've dealt with all sorts of people in my life. Trust me, I can handle them. He smiled, but it didn't reach his eyes. I just hate the thought of them judging you. You're so much more than what they deem worthy. I laughed lightly. Let them think what they want. I'm confident in who I am. Besides, it's you I care about, not their approval. We resumed our walk, the conversation shifting to lighter topics. But in the back of my mind, I couldn't help but wonder about the eventual meeting with his parents. What would they make of me, an office employee, in their eyes? As the week went on, Alex finally agreed to take me to meet them. I could tell he was nervous, but I assured him it would be fine. It's just dinner, what's the worst that can happen? I joked, trying to lighten the mood. He gave a half smile, clearly not convinced. You haven't met my mother. The day of the meeting arrived. I dressed carefully, choosing an outfit that was professional yet understated. As Alex picked me up, he kept glancing over at me, as if trying to gauge my mood. You look great, he said, attempting a smile. Thanks. I'm ready for this, I replied, though a small knot of anxiety had formed in my stomach. The drive to Alex's parents' house was filled with a tense silence. Despite his repeated warnings about their elitist attitudes, I had assured him I could handle whatever was thrown my way. But nothing could have truly prepared me for the opulence that greeted us as we pulled into the driveway of a mansion that could easily have been mistaken for a small palace. As we walked up to the grand entrance, Alex muttered under his breath, "Just remember, they're all about appearances." The door swung open, and we were ushered into a living room that was a spectacle of extravagance. Every surface gleamed with gold, the furniture was lavish, and the air smelled faintly of expensive perfume. Alex's parents, seated like royalty on their plush sofas, barely glanced up as we entered. Mother, father, this is Jane, Alex introduced me, his voice betraying a hint of nervousness. His mother, draped in what looked like the entire contents of a jewelry store, gave me a cursory nod. So, you're the young woman Alex has been seeing. And what is it that you do, dear? Her tone was polite, but her eyes were sharp, evaluating. I handed her my business card, trying to keep the atmosphere light. I work as an office employee at a promising company. It keeps me busy. She took the card, barely giving it a glance, before laying it aside. An office employee, I see. And your earnings, are they substantial? Alex jumped in, trying to steer the conversation away. Mom, Jane's doing really well for herself. She's very dedicated to her work. His father, who had been silently observing until then, chimed in with a voice that carried a note of condescension. Alex, we hoped you'd find someone more akin to our social circle. A young lady of certain means and standing. I felt a twinge of irritation but masked it with a smile. I believe in making my own way in the world. It's not about how much you earn, but how you earn it, right? Alex's mother let out a small, patronizing laugh. Idealistic, but the world doesn't always work that way, dear. In our circles, status and connections matter. The conversation was spiraling into an uncomfortable territory. Alex was visibly tense, his hands clenched into fists at his side. His father leaned forward, his gaze piercing. Tell me, Jane, with your modest occupation, how do you plan to fit into our lifestyle? Into Alex's future? Before I could respond, Alex interjected, his voice firm. Jane fits perfectly into my future, that's all that matters. Her job doesn't define her. His mother scoffed, her gaze cold. Alex, be realistic. We want the best for you, and this girl, well, she's hardly the best, is she? The dinner with Alex's parents, post the awkward introduction, was shaping up to be an ordeal. The dining room was as opulent as the rest of the house, and the tension was palpable as we sat down to eat. I could feel the judgmental gaze of Alex's mother boring into me. So, Jane, tell us about your family. Are they office clerks too? Alex's father inquired, his tone laced with a not-so-subtle insinuation. I kept my composure, replying politely, my parents are retired now. They've always believed in a simple, honest living. His mother tittered, exchanging a look with her husband. Simple and honest, how quaint. But we were hoping Alex would marry into a more influential family. Alex, who had been growing increasingly uncomfortable, finally spoke up. Mom, Dad, I don't see why any of this matters. Jane is an amazing person. That's what counts. His mother's response was immediate and sharp. It matters, Alex. You can't just bring home anyone. There are standards. The conversation quickly escalated as Alex's parents began to openly question my suitability for their son. They made snide remarks about my job, my income, and my background. I tried to steer the conversation to more neutral topics, but Alex's mother was relentless. I just don't understand, Alex. With your background, you could have had your pick of eligible young women. Why settle for an office employee? Feeling a mix of anger and humiliation, I finally spoke up. I may not come from wealth, but I value hard work and integrity. Isn't that important? Alex's father scoffed. In our world, those are secondary. It's about maintaining a certain standard, a legacy. Alex reached for my hand under the table, giving it a reassuring squeeze. Jane doesn't need to come from money or status. She's accomplished in her own right. His mother's next move was entirely unexpected. In a sudden display of anger, she picked up her coffee cup and splashed its contents at me, staining my blouse. This is what we think of your accomplishments. I stood up, shocked and dripping with coffee. Alex was immediately at my side, his voice tinged with anger and disbelief. Mom, what the hell? I'm sorry, Jane. We're leaving right now, Alex said, his voice firm. As we walked out of the dining room, his mother's cold voice followed us. You're making a grave mistake, Alex. The drive back was quiet, the air filled with unspoken words and simmering anger. Alex kept apologizing, saying he should have never put me in that situation. It's not your fault, Alex, I reassured him, though inside, I felt a storm of emotions. I was angry, yes, but more than that, I was determined. Alex's parents had shown their true colors, and I wasn't going to let their archaic views of status and wealth define me or my relationship with Alex. After the distressing dinner with Alex's parents, I found myself sitting in my living room, still reeling from the events. The coffee stain on my blouse had dried, but the unpleasantness of the evening lingered. I knew there was only one person who could offer me the comfort and advice I needed, my mother. Picking up my phone, I dialed her number. As soon as she answered, I could hear the warmth in her voice, a soothing balm to my frayed nerves. Mom, it's Jane. I had the dinner with Alex's parents tonight, and it was a disaster, I said, my voice shaking slightly. Oh, sweetheart, what happened? Her concern was palpable, even through the phone. I took a deep breath and started recounting the evening in detail, from the moment we entered the opulent house, the condescending looks, the probing questions about my job, and the final humiliating incident with the coffee. As I spoke, my mother listened quietly, occasionally interjecting with a soft to show she was following. When I finished, there was a brief silence on her end. Jane, those people sound absolutely dreadful. I'm so sorry you had to go through that, she finally said, her voice laced with anger and sympathy. It was awful, Mom. They looked down on me the moment they saw my business card. They think I'm just an office employee, nothing more, I explained, feeling a lump form in my throat. There was a pause on the other end of the line. Do they know about your company? That you're not just an office employee? That your company's turnover is tens of millions of dollars? My mother's tone turned firm. Jane, you are a successful businesswoman, a self-made entrepreneur. You've worked hard to get where you are. Don't let their ignorance diminish your achievements. I sighed, leaning back on the couch. I know, Mom. But it's not just about me. It's about Alex too. I'm afraid this will put a strain on our relationship. Listen to me, Jane. If Alex truly loves you, he'll stand by you, regardless of his parents' opinions. And if he doesn't, then he's not worth it, she said, her words ringing with conviction. You're right, Mom. I shouldn't let them get to me. But part of me wants to show them who I really am, to prove them wrong, I admitted, feeling a flicker of defiance. And you will, in your own time and in your own way. Just remember, you're not doing it for them, you're doing it for yourself, she advised. We talked for a while longer, her words providing the comfort and reassurance I needed. By the time we ended the call, I felt a renewed sense of determination. Alex's parents might have their prejudices, but I wasn't going to let their narrow-mindedness dictate my life or my relationship with their son. I had faced challenges before and come out stronger. This was just another obstacle to overcome, and I was ready to face it head-on. The days following the dinner with Alex's parents were filled with a mix of reflection and determination. I couldn't shake off the feeling of being judged and underestimated. It was time to turn the tables, but in a way that was subtle and smart. I decided to start by learning more about their company. Sitting at my desk the next day, I called in my assistant, Sarah. Sarah, I need some research done, I began, my tone serious. Of course, Jane. What do you need? She asked, ready with her notepad. It's about a company owned by my boyfriend's parents. I need a detailed report on its financial health, assets, liabilities, everything, I instructed, handing her a piece of paper with the company's name. Sarah looked up, a hint of surprise in her eyes. Got it. I'll get on it right away. As Sarah got to work, I leaned back in my chair, my mind racing with possibilities. If their company was in as bad a shape as I suspected, there might be an opportunity to make a move, one that would put me in a position of power. A couple of days later, Sarah came back with the report. Her findings confirmed my suspicions. Alex's parents' company was teetering on the edge of bankruptcy. They had been masking their financial troubles with a facade of wealth. Looks like they've been living beyond their means, I mused, scanning the report. Do you want to proceed with any actions? Sarah asked, watching me closely. Yes, start acquiring their debt. I want to gain control of their company, I said, a plan forming in my mind. Over the next few weeks, I worked meticulously, using my resources and connections to discreetly buy up the company's debt. As I gained more control, I could feel the gears of change turning. Finally, the day came when I had acquired enough to call a shareholders' meeting. I would confront Alex's parents on my terms, in a setting where they couldn't dismiss me as just an office employee. As I prepared for the meeting, I thought about what I would say, how I would reveal my identity. I wanted them to understand that underestimating someone based on their job title was a mistake, one that they were about to learn the hard way. Weeks of meticulous planning and maneuvering had led to this moment. As I sat in my office, finalizing the preparations for the upcoming shareholders' meeting, I felt a mix of anticipation and resolve. It was time to reveal the true extent of my influence over Alex's parents' company. The morning of the meeting, I arrived at the company's headquarters, a sleek building that exuded corporate power. Walking through the halls, I could feel the curious glances of the employees. In the boardroom, shareholders and key personnel were gathered, the air thick with tension and expectation. As I entered the room, I spotted Alex's parents among the attendees. Their expressions shifted from surprise to disbelief as they saw me. I took my place at the head of the table, my heart beating steadily. Alex's father was the first to break the silence. "What is the meaning of this? Why are you here, Jane?" I looked around the room, meeting the eyes of everyone present. "Good morning. As some of you may already know, I am now the majority shareholder of this company. Over the past few weeks, I have acquired significant portions of its debt, giving me controlling interest." Murmurs filled the room as the weight of my words settled in. Alex's mother looked at me, her face a mix of anger and disbelief. "This is outrageous. You can't just waltz in here and take over." I remained calm, my voice steady. "Actually, I can. And I have. The company was on the brink of bankruptcy, and my actions have saved it from collapse." Alex's father stood up, red-faced and furious. "You have no right to do this. This is our company, our life's work." "I understand this is difficult for you," I said, empathizing despite their previous treatment of me. "But this company needed saving, and I was in a position to do so. My intention is to turn this company around, not to dismantle it." The room fell silent, the reality of the situation sinking in. I continued, "Effective immediately, there will be changes in leadership. We need fresh perspectives and strategies to steer this company back to profitability." Alex's father bristled at my words. "And what about me? What is my role in all this?" I met his gaze, my decision clear. "I'm afraid your role as the director is no longer tenable. We need new leadership to move forward." The shock was evident on his face, a stark contrast to his usual confident demeanor. "You can't do this to me. I built this company from the ground up." "I respect what you've built," I replied, "but it's time for a change. The company needs to evolve, and that starts with new leadership." As the meeting concluded, Alex's parents left the room in a daze, their world turned upside down. I watched them go, feeling a sense of closure. I hadn't sought revenge, but rather justice and a chance to right what was wrong. In the wake of the upheaval at the company, Alex's parents, consumed by their rage and humiliation, attempted to sow discord between Alex and me. They launched into a tirade of accusations and spiteful comments about me, trying to paint me as the villain in their fall from grace. But Alex, knowing the truth of their character and actions, remained unmoved by their efforts. One evening, Alex and I sat down in my living room, the soft glow of the lamp casting a warm light over us. It was time to clear the air and discuss everything that had transpired. "Jane, my parents, they've been trying to turn me against you. Saying all sorts of things about what you did," Alex began, his voice tinged with disappointment. I took his hand, looking into his eyes. "I'm sorry, Alex. I never wanted to cause a rift between you and your family. Taking over the company was a tough decision, but I couldn't stand by and watch their arrogance and mistreatment of others." Alex squeezed my hand reassuringly. "I don't blame you, Jane. I've seen their true colors. In fact, I've cut off all communication with them. They need to learn to live in the real world, not the one they've fabricated." The air felt lighter as a burden lifted off my shoulders. "There's something else I need to apologize for," I added, pausing for a moment. "I should have told you earlier that I'm not just an office employee. I'm actually the head of a large company." Alex smiled gently, his eyes full of understanding. "I figured there was more to you than you let on. And I get why you kept it a secret. It doesn't change how I feel about you, Jane." His acceptance and understanding were all I needed to hear. We decided to move forward, leaving the past behind. Our wedding was a simple affair, attended only by our closest friends and family. It was a day filled with genuine joy and love, a stark contrast to the pretentious and superficial world Alex's parents inhabited. As for Alex's parents, their fall from grace was swift and complete. Their former friends and social circle, once drawn to their wealth and status, now shunned them. They found themselves on the other side of the judgment and exclusion they had so freely doled out to others. It was a bitter irony that they were now outcasts in the very society they had once ruled. In the quiet moments of our new life together, Alex and I often reflected on the journey that brought us here. We had weathered the storm of prejudice and emerged stronger. Our love was not built on status or material wealth, but on mutual respect, understanding, and a shared vision of the future. "Hey, I'm Emily," I said, somewhat awkwardly extending my hand at a small get-together where I first laid eyes on Alex. He was a mutual friend's acquaintance, and there was something immediately approachable about him. "Alex," he responded, his handshake firm and friendly. "So, you're the financial analyst Sarah keeps talking about?" I laughed, a bit embarrassed. "Yep, that's me. And you're the guy who owns a restaurant and loves hiking?" He smiled, and his eyes lit up. "Absolutely. Nothing tops a good hike." "You a fan?" "Totally," I replied. Our conversation flowed effortlessly from there, delving into our shared passions for outdoor adventures and favorite hiking spots. What started as casual meetings soon blossomed into something more. Dates followed, each one feeling more natural than the last. We discovered a comfortable rhythm together, finding joy in our shared interests. It felt like Alex and I had known each other for ages. One evening, after a particularly enjoyable hike, Alex stopped and looked at me intently. "Emily, this might sound crazy, but I think what we have is pretty special. Do you feel it too?" My heart raced, but I couldn't hide my smile. "I do, Alex. It's like we were meant to meet." Fast forward a year, and we were exchanging vows in a simple but heartfelt wedding ceremony. Just us, our families, and a few close friends. Afterwards, we moved into the house I inherited from my grandmother. It wasn't a modern building, but it had a warmth and charm to it. I remember watching Alex as he first walked through the house. He wandered from room to room, absorbing every detail. "This house has character, Em," he said with a smile. "It feels like a home." I was relieved. "I'm glad you think so. I was worried it might seem too old-fashioned for you." Alex laughed heartily. "Old-fashioned? No way. It's perfect. It's us." Living in the house I inherited from my grandma was like stepping back in time. Every creaky floorboard and the slightly faded wallpaper told a story. Alex and I loved it, but I was nervous about his mom's first visit. Mrs. Carter, with her taste for all things new and expensive, was a stark contrast to our humble abode. The day she arrived, she stepped into the living room, her high heels clicking sharply on the wooden floor. She looked around with a barely concealed frown. "Oh, this is where you live," she said, her tone dripping with skepticism. "It's quaint." I clenched my jaw, feeling a sting from her words. Alex gave my hand a reassuring squeeze, communicating his support. "Yeah, Mom, isn't it great? Emily's really made it feel like home." Mrs. Carter raised an eyebrow, her gaze sweeping across the room. "Well, it's certainly quaint. But, darling, you could do so much better." Alex squeezed my hand, a silent show of support. I appreciated his gesture, but Mrs. Carter's words stung. I loved this house, every imperfection and memory it held. The conversation shifted to dinner plans, but Mrs. Carter's comments lingered in my mind. "So, Emily, what are we having? I assume we're dining in tonight?" I nodded, trying to sound upbeat. "Yes, I thought I'd cook something special. A family recipe." "Oh, how domestic," she remarked, a hint of sarcasm in her voice. "I hope it's up to standard." Dinner was an awkward affair. I could feel Mrs. Carter's eyes judging every aspect of the meal. Alex did his best to keep the conversation light, but the tension was palpable. After dinner, as we sat in the living room, Mrs. Carter's critique continued. Alex, really, this place could use some updating. Why don't you move somewhere more modern? Alex, trying to keep the peace, replied, Mom, we've talked about this. Emily and I love it here. It's our first home together. Mrs. Carter sighed dramatically. Well, I suppose if you're happy. But really, think about your future. This place is hardly suitable for a family. I bit my tongue, feeling my patience wearing thin. This house was more than just walls and a roof to me. It was a part of my family's history, a piece of my heart. As she finally left, I felt a mixture of relief and frustration. Alex wrapped his arms around me, whispering, Don't let her get to you, Em. This is our home, and I wouldn't change a thing. I leaned into his embrace, grateful for his support, but dreading the thought of future visits. Mrs. Carter's words echoed in my mind, but I was determined not to let her snide remarks tarnish the love and memories this old house held for us. The evening air was cool as Alex walked through the door, looking more defeated than I'd ever seen him. The restaurant, his lifelong dream, was now a source of endless worry. I could see the stress etched in the lines of his face. Another rough day? I asked, handing him a cup of coffee. He slumped into a chair at our kitchen table, running a hand through his hair. Yeah, it's just, nothing's working, Em. I don't know how much longer I can keep the doors open. I sat across from him, my mind racing for ways to help. Have you looked into the finances thoroughly? Maybe there's a leak somewhere, something you've missed? Alex let out a humorless laugh. Finances were never my strong suit. I'm a chef, not an accountant. A thought struck me. Well, I could give it a try. I'm no expert in restaurant finances, but I know my way around numbers. He looked up, his eyes meeting mine. You'd do that? For me? For the restaurant? Of course, I replied, feeling a mix of nervousness and determination. Let's see what we can find. The following morning, I dived into the restaurant's accounts. Receipts, invoices, and spreadsheets were spread across our dining table. It was worse than I'd feared. Expenses were sky high, and the income wasn't tracked properly. Later that evening, I presented my findings to Alex. Okay, here's the deal. Your food costs are through the roof. You're spending a fortune on imported ingredients that you can easily substitute with local ones. Alex leaned in, scrutinizing the papers. But won't that change the taste? I shook my head. Not necessarily. It's about being smart with choices. Plus, your menu prices, they're too low. You're undervaluing your dishes. He rubbed his chin thoughtfully. I always wanted to make it affordable. But I see your point. And there's more, I continued, pointing to another column. These miscellaneous expenses, fancy napkins, expensive cleaning services. You can cut back without compromising quality. The weeks that followed were a blur of activity. Alex revamped the menu, striking a balance between cost and quality. I negotiated with suppliers, trimming down the unnecessary expenses. We even hosted a few special events to attract more customers. One evening, Alex came home with a rare spark in his eyes. He wrapped me in a hug, his voice muffled. I can't believe it. We're actually making a profit. It's working, Em. It's really working. We stood there in the kitchen, holding each other, the weight of the past weeks lifting slightly. The restaurant was turning a corner, thanks to our combined efforts. But as I would soon learn, success comes with its own set of challenges, ones that neither of us had anticipated. Alex's restaurant was now buzzing with success, and with that success came a change in him that I hadn't anticipated. It started small. A new watch here, a designer shirt there. But it quickly escalated. One evening, he came home with a brand new, high-end smartphone. Check this out, he said, his face lit up with excitement. Latest model. Isn't it cool? I glanced at the phone and then at him. It's nice, Alex, but do you really need it? I thought we agreed to be careful with spending. He shrugged, his attention still on the phone. I know. But the restaurant's doing great. We can afford a few luxuries. It wasn't just the purchases that bothered me, it was his attitude. The careful, considerate man I married seemed to be getting lost in a wave of extravagance. Alex, we need to think about reinvesting in the restaurant, remember? And our own savings, I reminded him, hoping to spark some of his earlier practicality. He waved off my concern. Relax. The restaurant's making more than enough. We deserve to enjoy the money. But it didn't stop there. Bills for extravagant dinners and nights out started to pile up. Each time I brought it up, Alex dismissed it. We're fine, Stop worrying so much. One day, I noticed our joint account was running lower than it should. Alex, we're supposed to be saving for the future. You're spending way too much. He looked at me, his expression one of annoyance. Why are you always on my case? Let me enjoy my success. But it's our future, Alex. We can't just blow through the money like this. He scoffed. My restaurant, my money. I'll spend it how I want. I was taken aback. This wasn't the Alex I knew, the one who valued our partnership. I tried a different approach. What about contributing to the household expenses? We agreed to split them. He rolled his eyes. That's your house, Why should I pay for something that's already yours? As the days passed, the tension between us grew. His spending continued, and each time I brought it up, it led to an argument. The man I had worked so hard with to save his dream was now recklessly throwing away our future for short-lived pleasures. Just when I thought things couldn't get more complicated, Mrs. Carter, Alex's mother, decided she wanted to be closer to us. The day she called, I was already feeling overwhelmed with the way things were going at home. Emily, dear, I'd been thinking. Mrs. Carter's voice echoed through the phone in her usual, lofty tone. It's time I moved closer to you and Alex. This town is just too dull for me. I hesitated, gripping the phone a little tighter. That's a big decision, Mrs. Carter. Are you sure? Oh, absolutely. But don't worry, I won't impose on you in that quaint little house of yours. I'll need you to find me a nice apartment nearby, she said, as if it was the most natural request in the world. I was taken aback. An apartment? Mrs. Carter, I'm not sure if. She cut me off. Now, Emily, I won't take no for an answer. A small, stylish place will do. I'm sure you can handle the rent for a while. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. I'll need to discuss this with Alex, I managed to say before ending the call. When I told Alex about his mother's request, he just shrugged. I don't know, I'm a bit tight on cash right now with the restaurant and all. Maybe you could cover it? I stared at him, incredulous. Me? Alex, we're already stretching our budget with your spending. How can we afford her rent too? He avoided my gaze. It's just for a while, until I get things sorted. Come on, for my mom? Reluctantly, I agreed to rent an apartment for Mrs. Carter for 6 months. It cost us $2,000 a month, a significant hit to our savings. The day she moved into her new place, Mrs. Carter made sure to let me know her standards. It's smaller than I'm used to, but I suppose it'll have to do. You've done an adequate job, Emily. I forced a smile, trying to keep the peace. I'm glad you like it, Mrs. Carter. But things only got worse. Mrs. Carter started coming over every day. Each visit was a reminder of how different our worlds were. She'd walk around our house, her nose turned up at everything. this old thing is still here? I thought you'd have gotten rid of it by now," she commented one day, eyeing an antique vase my grandmother had left me. I clenched my fists, feeling my patience wear thin. "It's a family heirloom, Mrs. Carter. It means a lot to me." She just sniffed. Sentimentality. I never saw the point. Each of her visits left me feeling more drained and frustrated. I tried to talk to Alex about it, but he'd just brush it off. "She's just set in her ways, Em. Let's not make a big deal out of it." But it was a big deal to me. Mrs. Carter's presence was like a constant, dark cloud over our home, and I was starting to feel like there was no escaping it. The weight of her expectations and criticisms was becoming too much to bear, and I felt trapped in a situation with no easy way out. Mrs. Carter's daily visits became a routine I dreaded. Each day, she brought a fresh wave of criticism and backhanded comments. I tried to keep my cool, but it was wearing me down. One particularly exhausting evening, as I was preparing dinner, she walked into the kitchen. "Oh, cooking again, Emily? You do know there are restaurants for that sort of thing," she said with a smirk. I forced a smile, chopping vegetables a bit more aggressively than necessary. "I enjoy cooking, Mrs. Carter. It's relaxing for me." She scoffed, leaning against the counter. "Relaxing? A woman of your caliber should be relaxing in a spa, not slaving away in a kitchen. But then again, you always were a bit plain." The conversation shifted when she casually mentioned something that caught me off guard. "You know, I stopped by the restaurant the other day. Alex has hired some new waitresses. Young, pretty things. Very attentive." A pang of something, jealousy, insecurity, twisted in my stomach. "New waitresses?" "Yes, quite the eye candy. I'm surprised you haven't noticed. But then again, you're always so busy with your little projects," she said, her voice dripping with insinuation. The next day, curiosity and concern got the better of me. I decided to visit the restaurant unannounced. As I walked in, I saw them, a group of young, attractive waitresses, all laughing and chatting. Alex was there too, clearly enjoying the attention. I approached, trying to keep my composure. "Hi, Alex. Busy day?" He looked up, startled. "Oh, yeah, just keeping things running. What brings you here?" I glanced at the waitresses, who had scattered at my arrival. "Just thought I'd surprise you." "Who are the new faces?" Alex shrugged, a bit too nonchalantly. "Oh, just some new hires. Good for business, you know." I forced a smile, feeling a knot form in my gut. "Right, good for business." That evening, I brought it up again. "Alex, about the new waitresses." He cut me off, his tone dismissive. They're just employees. Don't make it into something it's not." But it was hard to shake the feeling that something wasn't right. A few days later, I decided to visit the restaurant again, this time in the evening. What I saw confirmed my worst fears. Alex was in a corner, his arm around one of the waitresses, laughing and whispering in her ear. The sight felt like a physical blow. I stood there, frozen, as realization washed over me. The morning sun was barely peeking through the curtains, casting a soft glow in the kitchen where I sat, clutching a mug of coffee that had long since gone cold. The revelation of Alex's affair with a waitress from his restaurant was swirling in my mind, a storm I could no longer ignore. He walked in, his footsteps echoing loudly in the tense silence. "Alex, we need to talk." "About what I saw at the restaurant," I said, my voice barely above a whisper, but firm. He just smirked, pouring himself a cup of coffee. "Oh, you mean the new waitresses? Yeah, they're a nice addition, aren't they?" I stared at him, disbelief and anger mingling in my chest. "Nice addition? Alex, I saw you with her. Don't treat me like a fool." He leaned against the counter, his smirk widening. Come on, Em. It's nothing. Just a little fun on the side. You know how it is. How it is? My voice rose in incredulity. You're my husband. Fun on the side isn't how it is supposed to be. Alex took a sip of his coffee, his arrogance palpable. Em, we've been married for what, 3 years now? Things get boring. I needed someone to spice things up. I felt a knot form in my stomach. So our marriage is just some game to you? Something you get bored of? He shrugged, his casual demeanor infuriating me. Not a game, just life. I'm a man, Em. I have needs. Needs that obviously you're not fulfilling. I clenched my fists, fighting back tears. I've been here for you, supported you through everything. And this is how you repay me? He laughed, a cold, harsh sound. Repay you? Oh, please. You've been a good wife, sure, but that's not enough. I need excitement, adventure. You're just too plain. The word plain echoed in my ears, a stark reminder of his mother's earlier insults. And what about our vows? Did they mean nothing to you? Alex rolled his eyes. Vows are just words, Em. They don't mean we can't have a little fun. Why don't you loosen up a bit? I stood up, my chair scraping loudly against the floor. This is not a little fun, Alex. You've broken our trust, our marriage. I can't be with someone who has so little respect for me. I want a divorce. His expression finally changed, a flicker of surprise crossing his features. Divorce? Seriously? You're that upset over a harmless fling? It's not harmless, Alex. It's betrayal, I said, my voice breaking. He shrugged, his nonchalance returning. Fine. Have it your way. I've been feeling tied down anyway. As I started the divorce proceedings, the reality of our crumbling marriage hit hard. When Mrs. Carter, Alex's mother, got wind of it, her reaction was just as callous as her son's. I always knew it would come to this, she sneered during a phone call. You were never right for my Alex. Too dull, too domestic. I gritted my teeth, trying to keep my composure. Well, Mrs. Carter, Alex is no longer my problem. He's all yours now. She laughed, a sound filled with malice. Oh, I'm delighted. He needs someone who can keep up with him, not a boring little nobody like you. 6 months after the divorce, I found myself in a place of newfound peace. The house, once filled with tension, now felt serene, a sanctuary from the past chaos. That tranquility was shattered one evening by an unexpected knock on the door. I opened it to find Alex and Mrs. Carter standing there, disheveled and looking defeated. Emily, we need to talk, Alex said, avoiding my gaze. I crossed my arms, feeling a mix of surprise and wariness. Alex? What are you doing here? And Mrs. Carter? Mrs. Carter stepped forward, her usual haughty demeanor gone. Emily, dear, we've had a bit of a setback. The restaurant, it's gone under. I frowned, processing her words. Gone under? What happened? Alex shuffled his feet, a shadow of his former arrogance. Things went downhill after the divorce. I may have made some bad financial choices. Mrs. Carter interjected, her voice desperate. We've nowhere to go, Emily. Our apartment lease is up, and with no income, we can't renew. I was stunned. You want to stay here? After everything that's happened? Alex finally met my eyes, a hint of shame in them. I know I messed up. But this is temporary, just until we get back on our feet. Mrs. Carter added quickly, yes, just for a little while. We wouldn't be a bother. I took a deep breath, the audacity of their request staggering. Alex, Mrs. Carter, after everything that's happened, you really think it's appropriate to ask this of me? Alex's voice was pleading. I know I don't deserve your help, but we're desperate. I shook my head, my decision clear. I'm sorry, but no. You both made it clear how you felt about me and my home. I can't just forget that. Mrs. Carter's face fell, her usual composure crumbling. But where will we go, Emily? Please, you're our only hope. I remained firm, despite the pang of sympathy. You need to figure that out on your own. I did, after everything fell apart. They lingered for a moment, a mix of disbelief and despair on their faces, before finally turning away. As I closed the door, a sense of finality washed over me. I had turned a new page, one where their judgment and betrayal no longer held sway over me. I walked back into my living room, the echoes of their pleas still lingering in the air. But as I sat down, a feeling of empowerment filled me. I had survived their scorn, their betrayal, and come out stronger. My life, once overshadowed by their presence, was now my own again. My name's Helen. I'm your run-of-the-mill, 30-year-old economist, living a life as ordinary as the next person. You wouldn't pick me out of a crowd. Average height, average weight, brown hair, brown eyes, I'm as regular as they come. I've always been a wallflower in the world of romance, never quite stepping into the spotlight. Men never seemed to find me particularly captivating, and to be honest, I didn't mind. I had my job at a big company, my ever-growing collection of books, and my small but tight-knit group of friends to keep me company. One day, my friends, who were more outgoing than I could ever hope to be, decided that I needed to get out more. Helen, you gotta get out of that shell of yours, they'd said, and despite my protests, I found myself agreeing. So, I went, fully expecting to spend the evening tucked away in a corner with a glass of wine for company. At the party, amidst the cacophony of loud music and louder conversations, I noticed a tall figure weaving his way through the crowd towards me. It was a man, and not just any man. This guy was the kind of handsome that made you do a double take. His name was Ryan, and he had a certain charisma about him that was hard to ignore. I was surprised when he approached me. Men like him didn't usually notice women like me. Hey, mind if I crash here? He asked, pointing to the vacant chair next to me. His voice was deep, and his tone was casual, like we'd been buddies for years. I looked around, thinking he must have mistaken me for someone else. Me? I asked, pointing to myself. He let out a hearty laugh that somehow managed to rise above the party's noise. Yeah, you. You ain't holding this seat for some knight in shining armor, are ya? No, not at all, I replied, still taken aback by his forwardness. Please, have a seat. And so, he did. We started chatting, and I was taken aback by how easily the conversation flowed. He was an engineer, had an odd fondness for 19th century literature, and his sense of humor was as dry as a bone. He was easy to talk to, and for the first time in a long time, I felt like I was being seen. Helen, can I ask you something? He asked, a couple of hours into our conversation. Sure, Ryan. What's on your mind? Why are you single? I mean, you're intelligent, you've got a wicked sense of humor, and you're not half bad to look at. Yeah, don't give me that look, you're a catch, he said, as I started to protest. I blushed, not used to such compliments. I guess I haven't found the right guy yet. He gave me a knowing smile. Well, maybe your luck's about to turn. We exchanged numbers that night, and he called me the very next day, asking me out. I said yes. Ryan and I were like two peas in a pod. We hit it off right from the get-go, and soon found ourselves in a whirlwind romance. He was attentive, remembered the little things that mattered to me, like how I liked my coffee black with 2 sugars, or that I preferred scrambled eggs over fried. He even remembered the names of all the characters from my favorite book series, which was no small feat. I was falling for him, and falling hard. One day, he decided it was time for me to meet his folks. His mom, Martha, was as sweet as pie, and his dad, George, was a quiet man who let his actions do the talking. Their house was a cozy little place, filled with pictures of Ryan from his childhood to his graduation. It was clear they were proud of their boy. "Helen, you've snagged yourself a good one," Martha said, patting my hand. "We're glad our boy found you." George, a man of few words, just nodded in agreement. "You look after him, and he'll do the same for you." Their words touched me, and I felt a sense of belonging. It was like I'd been a part of their family all along. A few months into our relationship, Ryan threw me for a loop. We were having dinner at our favorite restaurant when he suddenly got down on one knee. "Helen, will you marry me?" he asked, his eyes filled with hope. I was taken aback. We hadn't been dating for long, but it felt right. I looked into his eyes and saw a future I wanted to be a part of. "Yes, Ryan. I'll marry you." Our wedding was a simple affair, just the way I liked it. We didn't need a big, fancy shindig. We just needed each other. My dad was over the moon. He took to Ryan like a duck to water and was thrilled to see his little girl so happy. "You've done good, Helen," he said, giving Ryan a hearty pat on the back. "Look after my girl." "I will, sir," Ryan replied, a serious look on his face. The wedding was more beautiful than I could have ever imagined. I was never the type to dream about a big white wedding, but I found myself loving every minute of it. The dress, the flowers, the vows, it was all perfect. I felt beautiful, loved, and happier than I'd ever been. I was marrying the man I loved, and I couldn't wait to start our life together. As we were leaving the church, hand in hand, Ryan turned to me and said, "Helen, I've been thinking. I want us to move in with my folks. They ain't getting any younger, and they could use our help." I was surprised, but I agreed. I liked Martha and George, and I wanted to do my part. I was ready to start this new chapter of our lives. Little did I know, things were about to take a turn I never saw coming. We packed up our stuff and moved into Ryan's parents' old house. The place was ancient, a relic from another era, and it showed. The paint was peeling off the walls, the floors creaked with every step, and the roof leaked when it rained. But it was home, Ryan's childhood home, and now it was ours. Martha and George were over the moon to have us. They showered us with love and affection, so much so that it sometimes felt like they were laying it on a bit thick. But I shrugged it off, figuring they were just happy to have us around. "Darn good to have you here, Helen," George would say, clapping me on the shoulder with a grin. "House has been too quiet without you." Martha, always the doting mother, would fuss over us, making sure we were comfortable and had everything we needed. "You two, just make yourselves at home," she'd say, bustling around the kitchen. "This is your home now too." I was touched by their warmth and generosity, even if it did feel a bit over the top at times. I felt like I was part of their family, and I was excited about starting this new chapter of our lives. But then, a few weeks into our stay, Ryan dropped a bombshell. We were sitting at the dinner table, picking at our food, when he cleared his throat and said, "Helen, we need to talk." I looked up, surprised. Ryan was usually so easygoing, so laid back. To see him so serious was unsettling. "What's up?" I asked, my heart pounding in my chest. Ryan took a deep breath and said, "The house needs repairs, Helen. Serious repairs. The roof, the plumbing, the wiring, it's all shot. Mom and Dad can't afford to fix it." I was taken aback. I knew the house was old, but I didn't realize it was in such bad shape. "So what do we do?" I asked, my mind racing. Ryan looked at me, his eyes pleading. I was thinking, maybe we could help. "You know, use my salary and part of your savings to pay for the repairs." I was floored. My savings were meant for our future, for a house of our own, for our kids' education. To spend it on fixing up Ryan's parents' house, It was a lot to ask. But then Martha started crying, and George looked at me with such hope in his eyes. I couldn't say no. So I agreed. I agreed to use my savings to fix up the house. It was a tough decision, one that I wasn't entirely comfortable with, but I did it for Ryan, for Martha, and George. I did it because it was the right thing to do. The moment the renovations on the old house kicked off, the bills started rolling in like an avalanche. Every damn day, there was a new expense, another problem that needed fixing. The roof was leaking, the plumbing was shot, the wiring was a fire hazard, the costs were piling up faster than a snowdrift in a blizzard. One evening, after a particularly grueling day of dealing with contractors and arguing over bills, Ryan and I sat down at the kitchen table, our heads in our hands. The burden of our financial troubles was bearing down on us like a 2-ton weight, and we were both feeling the strain. Helen, we're in deep, Ryan said, his voice heavy with worry. These damn repairs, they're sucking us dry. We can't keep this up. I sighed, rubbing my temples. I know, Ryan. I know. But what choice do we have? We can't just stop now. The house is a wreck. It's not safe for your folks. Ryan nodded, and then dropped another bombshell. Helen, there's something else, he said, avoiding my gaze. I've been demoted at work. My pay's been slashed. I can't put in as much for the repairs as we planned. I was floored. What? When the hell were you going to tell me this, Ryan? I asked, my voice rising in disbelief. I didn't want to stress you out more, he said, finally meeting my gaze. I thought I could handle it. Well, you thought wrong. I snapped, my anger flaring up. Now what are we going to do? We were in a real tight spot. My savings were dwindling, the bills were piling up, and now Ryan was pulling back on his share. I felt like I'd been sucker punched. Martha and George, Ryan's folks, were worried, too. They could see the stress etched on our faces, hear the worry in our voices. They felt guilty, I could tell. They didn't want to be a burden, but they didn't know how to help. One evening, after yet another heated discussion about money, George pulled me aside. Helen, he said, his voice gruff, I want you to know, we appreciate everything you're doing for us. We know it's hard on you. I looked at him, tears welling up in my eyes. George, it's not your fault. We want to help. We just didn't realize how much it would cost. George nodded, his eyes sad. I know, Helen. I know. And we're grateful. But we don't want you two to ruin yourselves over this. It's not worth it. I hugged him, tears streaming down my face. George, your family. You're worth it. Despite the financial strain, despite the stress and worry, I didn't regret our decision. We were helping Martha and George, and that was what mattered. Money was tight, yes, and times were tough, but we were doing the right thing. We were taking care of family, and that was priceless. In the end, we managed to scrape by. We tightened our belts, cut back on our expenses, and did everything we could to save money. It was hard, but we made it work. We finished the repairs, and the house was safe and comfortable once more. The house was finally repaired, and to celebrate, my in-laws, Martha and George, threw a fancy dinner. The food was great, the wine was flowing, and everyone was in high spirits. But then, out of nowhere, Martha started sobbing, her tears falling onto the white linen tablecloth. We've done something terrible, she sobbed, her voice choked with emotion. We mortgaged the house. 200 grand. We have 2 months to pay it back or we lose everything. The room plunged into a stunned silence. The words hung in the air like a thick fog, obscuring the joy and merriment that had filled the room just moments ago. I could feel my heart pounding in my chest, the magnitude of the situation sinking in. 200 grand? The number seemed astronomical, a figure so large it was hard to comprehend. Why would you do something like that? I managed to ask, my voice barely audible over the deafening silence. The question hung in the air, unanswered, as Martha continued to sob inconsolably. George finally spoke. "We didn't have a choice, dear," he said, his voice somber. "Some years ago, I got into a difficult situation. It was a matter of life or death. We thought we could handle it, but we were wrong." As the reality of the situation began to sink in, I turned to my husband, Ryan, seeking some form of reassurance. But he just sat there, his face as white as the pristine tablecloth, his eyes wide with shock. "We're screwed," he finally muttered, his voice barely a whisper. "We can't pay that back. Not in 2 months." Then, as if a switch had been flipped, Ryan's demeanor changed. His shock gave way to a cunning glint in his eyes. "Your dad could help us out, right, Helen? He's got money." I felt a wave of disbelief wash over me. "You want me to ask my dad for money?" I asked incredulously. "That's your solution?" Ryan's face hardened, his eyes cold and calculating. "Why not? He's got more than enough. He wouldn't even miss it." "I can't believe you're suggesting this," I retorted, my temper flaring. "My dad worked hard for his money. It's not our place to ask him for help." Suddenly, Martha and George were on Ryan's side, their faces morphing from loving parents into stern accusers. "Don't you care about us, Helen?" Martha asked, her voice filled with disappointment. "Don't you want to help us?" The pressure was immense. I felt cornered, trapped. "Of course I care, but—" "But nothing," Ryan interrupted, his voice devoid of any warmth. "You either help us, or you don't. It's as simple as that." Tears welled up in my eyes, blurring my vision. I was being manipulated, coerced into making a decision I didn't want to. But in the face of their relentless pressure, I saw no other choice. "Fine," I conceded, my voice barely a whisper. "I'll ask my dad." A wave of relief washed over Ryan's face. "Thank you, Helen. You're saving us." But I didn't feel like a savior. I felt like a pawn in a cruel game of chess, maneuvered and manipulated at will. As I looked around the room, at the faces of my new family, a pang of regret pierced my heart. What had I gotten myself into? The night that was supposed to be a celebration had turned into a nightmare, and I couldn't help but wonder what the future held for us. I remember the day as if it was yesterday. I was sitting across from my father, asking for a favor. I needed to borrow money to pay off my in-laws' debt. His eyes, usually full of warmth, were serious as he listened to my plea. "I'll lend them the money, Helen," he said after a long silence, "but only if Ryan signs a receipt." I was taken aback. A receipt? It seemed so formal, so cold. But I understood his reasoning. He was a businessman, after all. He believed in doing things the right way, in black and white. Ryan, however, was clearly unhappy with this decision. He grumbled and complained, but eventually agreed. He borrowed $200,000 from my father against a receipt drawn up according to all the rules. The money was used to pay off his parents' debt for the house. And then, just as we thought things were getting better, tragedy struck. My father passed away suddenly from a heart attack. I was devastated. I had lost my rock, my support system. I had to prepare for his funeral, all while dealing with the shock and grief of his sudden passing. It was a challenging time, to say the least. One day, I returned home earlier than usual. I needed a break from the funeral preparations, from the condolences, from the sea of sorrowful faces. As I walked in, I heard voices coming from the living room. It was Ryan, Martha, and George. They were talking, their voices low and hushed. I quietly walked towards the living room, my heart pounding in my chest. I stood behind the door, listening to their conversation. They were talking about me, about the money, about the receipt. "We've done it, Ryan," I heard George say, his voice filled with glee. We've fooled her. We've gotten the money to repair the house and pay off the debts. But I'm tired, Dad, Ryan replied, his voice full of disgust. I'm tired of pretending. I'm tired of living with her. I want a divorce. But what about the receipt, Ryan? Martha asked, her voice stern and commanding. We need to get rid of it first. Only then can you divorce her. Don't worry, Mom, Ryan said confidently. I'll take care of it. I'll steal the receipt and destroy it. I felt like I'd been punched in the gut. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. They had planned this all along. They had used me, betrayed me. And now, they were planning to get rid of me. I slammed the front door, pretending I had just arrived. I put on a brave face, pretending everything was fine. Helen, dear, how are the funeral preparations going? Martha asked, her voice dripping with fake concern. They're going well, Martha, I replied, my voice steady. Thank you for asking. And with that, I walked away, my mind racing. I needed to figure out my next move. I needed to protect myself, to fight back. Over the next few days, I put on a brave face. I smiled, I laughed, I played the dutiful daughter-in-law. But inside, I was seething. I was hurt, I was angry, and I was determined to make them pay. The day of my father's funeral was a blur of tears and condolences, a whirlwind of sadness that left me drained. But as the last of the mourners left and the sun began to set, the real storm was only beginning. Back at the house, Ryan, his parents, Martha, and George, and I gathered in the living room. The air was thick with unspoken words, the silence only broken by the occasional clink of ice against glass as Ryan swirled his drink. I watched them from the corner of my eye, their faces a mask of sympathy and concern. But I knew better. Suddenly, Ryan broke the silence. Helen, he said, his voice cold and hard. You need to leave. I turned to him, feigning surprise. What? I asked, my voice shaky. You heard me, he said, his voice even colder. You need to leave. This is my parents' house, and you're not welcome here anymore. Martha and George nodded in agreement, their faces hard. We've put up with you for long enough, Helen, Martha said, her voice dripping with fake sweetness. But we don't need you anymore. And what about the house? I asked, pretending to be shocked. The money I lent you for the house? Martha laughed, a harsh, cruel laugh that echoed around the room. This house? She scoffed. This house is ours, Helen. And you have no place here. Ryan joined in her laughter, a cruel smile playing on his lips. And about that money, Helen, he said, his voice filled with mockery. I found those receipts at your father's house. And I destroyed them. His words hung in the air, a declaration of his deceit. But instead of breaking down, instead of giving in to the despair, I did something unexpected. I laughed. My laughter filled the room, a stark contrast to the heavy silence. Ryan, Martha, and George stared at me, their faces a picture of shock and confusion. You knew? Ryan stammered, his face pale. I nodded, my laughter subsiding. I knew, I said, my voice steady. I knew about your plans, about your deceit. But the receipts? George stammered, his face pale. We destroyed them. I shook my head, a smile playing on my lips. Those were just copies, George, I said, my voice calm. The real ones are with my lawyer. Ryan and George exchanged a glance, their faces pale. I could see the fear in their eyes. They knew they were cornered. You want the money back? Ryan asked, his voice shaky. I want it back, Ryan, I said, my voice firm. And I want it now. Otherwise, I'm going to the police. Ryan and George paled even more, their eyes wide with fear. Helen, please, George pleaded. We can work something out. I shook my head, my resolve unwavering. No, George, I said, my voice steady. You had your chance. Now, it's time to pay. After a long silence, Ryan finally spoke. We'll give you the house, he said, his voice shaky. In exchange for the IOUs. I nodded, satisfied. Good, I said, my voice calm. I'll have my lawyer draw up the papers. And with that, I stood up and walked out of the room, leaving them in stunned silence. I had done it. I had confronted them, I had exposed their deceit, I had won. A few weeks later, I watched from the window as Ryan and his parents packed their belongings into a moving van. They were leaving their home, their house. My house now. I couldn't help but smile as I watched them drive away, their faces a picture of defeat. I was free. Free from their manipulation, free from their deceit. I had won. I had taken back control of my life. And as I closed the door to my new house, I knew that I was finally ready to move on, to start a new chapter in my life. And so, as the sunset and the stars began to twinkle in the sky, I sat down in my new living room, a sense of peace washing over me. I had faced my fears, I had stood up for myself, I had won. And as I looked around my new home, I knew that I was stronger than I had ever been. I was a survivor, a fighter. And I was ready for whatever came next.